Our guest speaker tonight is Odetta Menard. Odetta is a soil and water conservation specialist, agricultural engineer, works for the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Food in Quebec, St. Hyacinthe, Quebec. Odetta's an agricultural engineer from St. Hyacinthe, completed her bachelor degree in agricultural engineering, a master's degree in engineering, and master's degree in business administration. She has been promoting soil health through better agricultural practices since 1988. In 2005, Odetta was inducted into the Canadian Soil and Water Conservation Hall of Fame. In 2009, Action Semi-Direct, the group Odetta works with, received the Provincial Environmental Entrepreneurship Award. Odetta has been active on many committees, boards, and producer clubs, raising awareness and promoting soil conservation issues. At the producer level, Odetta established a no-till network among producers, was involved in developing information fact sheets, and has helped organize meetings, conferences, and information sessions for producers and crop advisors. She was also instrumental in creating a no-till drill rental program for producers, a database that compares the economics of various tillage practices. She has established a regional soil conservation hall of fame for producers. Odetta has spoken to various audiences in soil and water conservation in Canada, the U.S., and France. I'd ask you all to now welcome Odetta Menard.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me like that, or you'd rather have me have that? Here we are. I'm moving a lot all of the time, so I'll have to work it out. I just want to tell you that I'm very happy to be here tonight to talk to you about soil conservation. I've been working in that for many, many years. As I was listening to what Joe was telling you, I had the feeling I've been doing that for 50 years. But I think it's a little less than that. Not much less, though. I was listening to the people that talked just before. Do you remember what they said? Because if you don't, I'm not bothering talking to you. Someone said they were talking about walking the field. Did you heard that? How many of you are walking their fields regularly? How many of you? Excuse me? Walking. How many of you dug a hole this summer? How many of you did a profile, read their soil? Are you sleeping, too tired? Did you forget about it already? We're going to talk about soil. Joe Vermont also said that we have to improve things. Do you remember hearing him saying that? And I'm always interpreting, which is something my husband always says I shouldn't do. And the way I interpret that is that if we have to improve things, is that we first admit that we're not perfect. This is wrong, right? I shouldn't say that so early in the evening. But this is not the only thing. It's also meaning that we are ready to do things differently. It means we have to look at things differently as well. I think it was you, Orge, that were talking about observe, taking sample, keep on the following. If you have a problem, even if we don't have any problem, we have to take time and to define what our soils look like. And Stuart really impressed me because within 8 minutes, he went through 22 slides. And I have 61. And so I'll try to break the records, or I'll take a lot more time to do that. So I'm very pleased to be here. And Ruth asked me to talk to you about soil health strategy, tillage, earthworms, roots, and economics. And I told her that every one of these topics I can make a talk of about an hour and a half. So tell me when you're tired. I'll start over tomorrow morning. So how to succeed, how to get into doing things and make it work. You know, if you change small things, if you want to change small things, you're going to change the way you're doing things. But if you want to make big changes on your enterprise, you have to change the way you look at things. And this is where the challenge is really. Every time I give talks or all the producers I've been working with, whenever there's a problem, it's so easy to go back to the old way of looking at things, to the old way of doing the solutions. How long have you been plowing? Is there anyone still plowing here? When I'm in Quebec, and there's a joke going all around in Quebec, they don't say the word plow in front of me. But in English, it has a different meaning, I suppose. How long have you been plowing? All your life. Your father was plowing. Your grandfather was probably, so now it's a gene. And by doing things differently, we have to get rid of that gene. It's just not a way of doing things, it's a way of living. So this is where the big challenge is. And there's a lot of neighbors all around the place that knows how to solve your problem in no-till. Just buy a plow, right? So how to succeed, for me, is to know why. Not only why we're doing things, but why we want to change. We have to know how. We have to get the knowledge. We have to take time. Take time. Take time to talk about it. Take time to go and meet people that are doing things differently. Take time to take time. Meaning, if you want to do something next summer, maybe it should be only the next summer, just to know what we're doing. And of course, we've got to have fun. If we're doing something and we're not having fun, we're pushed into it, it's not going to be working. As I was studying, I was having a project once, it was with solar energy. We were working in a farm, and we were putting solar panel, and everything was going fine, and so on. And one morning, I got there, and the farmer told me that he wanted everything to be taken out. Nothing was working. He doesn't want to see me anymore. This was crap. And so I said, okay, this is the way you feel. I went to the house, met the lady there, because I needed some data that she had. And she goes, I'm so happy that you're getting out of here. Because every time my technician would come, he would dirty the entrance. And when she would go in the dairy area to get her milk, she would have her feet dirty. And the only problem was not that the project was not working, it was just that the lady had her feet dirty when she got in the barn. So this is why I'm saying we have got to have fun. This was a good project, but it was not fun anymore. Let's talk about tillage, earthworms, roots, and economics. This is what we're going to look at. And let's talk about soil. Everything that we're looking at, we have to go back to soil. This is what I call the agricultural system. Soil, weed control, residue, water management, soil life. I think these are the things that you've got to get into your system, that you got to understand to make any system work. But it can get a lot more complicated. The neighbors. Do you have small, fun neighbors? Do they agree with whatever you're doing? Are you all neighbors? You all live all together? So these things are going fine. Banker. Are your bankers always agree with what you're doing? In Quebec, if someone goes to the banker and saying that he's gonna do no-till because that funny lady told him that earthworms are doing good stuff, bankers don't like that. They like plowing. They know what plowing does as a system. And so in order to make a system work, in order to make it right, the challenge we have is that we have to make all these segments work with one another. The problem we often have is that we take one, tillage. We change our tillage strategy, but we don't match it with the rest. Have you ever done that? Don't tell me. But when we're doing that, we're making the system not working. When I started to do that, to work in soil conservation, the researcher, they were doing tillage comparison, and they had that plowing plots, and they have that no-till plots. And what they were doing essentially is that they were taking all the data from the plowing, and they would get it into the no-till. So same planting date, same corn variety, same rotation, which was no rotation at all at that point. And so they were comparing a very foolproof system to a brand new one. And they didn't need much year to find out that the no-till system was not a good system compared to the conventional. Instead of taking that no-till system and trying to look at everything here and make it work and be able to say that once you get into no-till, you've got to think about residue management. You've got to think about controlled traffic. You've got to think about your neighbors. Soil erosion. This is where it all started. I'm going to take just a few moments here to talk about that soil erosion, which is mainly two big parts. Wind erosion, which you see here. Do you see that here? You have that here. Usually when that occurs and you walk in your field, you have that sandy part that will hurt your faces. And then they call me and they say, I want a windbreak. And by the time the wind goes down, they forgot that they wanted a windbreak. Broken structure. If the soil is flowing around, it's because it's not holding. The particles are not holding with each other. And it's probably a lack of residue. The other main part is the water erosion. And the water erosion, you can, I like that picture a lot. Do you see here that big water erosion that's coming out? Do you see it? Okay, and what you see is that this is not the first year that it's happening. And this is completely planted. Do you see the corn here, all over there? So this whole area here, it was plowed in. It was tilled at the springtime. It was planted. It was fertilized. And it also has its weed control. Yet, this whole area here is not going to produce anything. So the water is not getting in, and there's no structure to make sure that it's not breaking everything as it goes out by runoff. Water infiltration, probably that we have a little bit of soil compaction here that slows the water from getting in. So what we've been doing over the year is that we took these point here, lack of residue. I want to put some residue on top of it, so to make sure that the wind's not blowing it anymore. And I want it to be helping the water to infiltrate. And what's occurring is that I'm working into a 2D solution. I'm really taking one data, one set of looking at things, and what I'm doing is I'm putting that 2D solution that will bring me back really fast to the beginning of it. I have a lot of producers right now that the only thing that they're seeing to get rid of soil compaction is subsoiling. And so we're buying a lot of machinery, a lot of steel so that we can subsoil, and then we're going to be back in business. But we're not back in business because we're turning around. What we need to do is to find solutions that will take into account these characteristics here. If the soil particles are flowing around, it's because their structure is broken. And how is it that I can fix that structure? And by doing so, I'm getting into a 3D solution that will bring me right back to the soil health. We've been doing that. When I started 25 years ago, we were looking at that mechanical point of view. Then we put the economics into it, and I'll show you the numbers, but that didn't convince anyone. Because as a few of you told me already, there's that coffee shop talk. You don't go into that coffee shop on October 16 and say, I did $512 an acre this year. You want to say that you had, how many bushel that pleases you? 200 bushel, that pleases you. This is what you want to say. So that shop talk, that coffee shop talk, we had that economics to try to break it down. It didn't work. It just didn't work. And then we had that residue cover management that we came in. And after a few years, what we saw is that something changed in the soil. Somebody was asking me, I'm doing some cover crops. How much nitrogen can I account for the cover crops that I had? What I've been saying over the years is that this is not, you cannot count like 1 ton or 2 tons of biomass will give you 10 units of nitrogen. It's not that linear. It's because you're putting in cover crops. It's because you're having these roots feeding your soil. The nitrogen efficiency of your soil is going a lot better. Have you ever heard about nitrogen efficiency? Is this a yes? Very quiet yes, or maybe not. The nitrogen efficiency is the amount, this will tell you the amount of nitrogen you have to put in your soil in order to feed your plant, your crop. And I found out about 5 years ago only, and I was really surprised about that the fertilizing guides are based on a nitrogen efficiency of about 35%, which means that for every nitrogen unit your crop is needing, you have to put 3. And the fertilizing guides are based on a 35% efficiency. What is happening in a healthy soil is that we can get up to 80% efficiency, which means that we can cut off the nitrogens that we're going to put in. We're going to get into that. Which one's the best? You have a land to buy, and this is the only information you have. You have the choices between 2. Which one are you going to buy? The right-hand side? Who wants to buy the right-hand side? Who wants to buy the left-hand side?
What's the price?
That's what I was going to say. There's sometimes a lot of people says, I'm going to buy the left one because I can make it better. It's going to be cheaper. These two soil sample were taken just about 15 inches apart. I'm in a ridge till field, and this is a soil sample that I took on the ridge. It's in ridges for about 7 years, and this was taken in the rows. So the only difference between these two soil samples is really the machinery that went by. This is some place that has not had any machinery on. But why didn't you choose this one? Because you put yourself at the place of a root. There's only one root that can choose this one. This is the root system that needs to be in a soil that looks aerated. You have the feeling that it's healthy, and you think that this is where a root is going to grow better. But So what we're seeing mainly is that this is a compacted soil, and in a compacted soil you can have up to 75% mineral component. That's leaving only 20 to 30% places for the air and the water, and the rest to the organic matter. So this is the only space left for the roots to grow and to feed. And if you're looking at a very healthy soil, then you're at about 50% mineral, leaving 50% of the place for the air and water. Yet if I gave you a soil analysis, instead of showing you soil sample, if I'd given you a soil analysis, A and B, do you think it would show any difference? The soil analysis of these two samples are exactly the same. So based on the soil analysis, you had a 50% chance to buy a compacted soil. Because we're looking at the soil over the past year a lot with respect to the chemistry of it. We're having recipe based on the chemistry, and we're looking at the chemistry, but what we have to be looking at is the physical and the biological part of the soil. And this is what it's going to change this soil here into that soil there. The biology of it, and that will change the physics of it, and that will make the chemistry works better. Does that make any sense? Is that good enough? When I'm talking about physical characteristic, what do I hear? What do I mean? This is written. You can just tell me about it. Structural stability. Do you know what structural stability is? Do you have the structural stability of your soil? Do you know how to improve your structural stability? Available water. I know that you had a lot of water this fall, but some years we don't have much water. Surface compaction, subsoil compaction. Is there a difference between the surface compaction and the subsoil compaction? Is that the same thing? But what does it do? This is the very important part of it. Because of the structural stability, this will influence the aeration of the soil, the infiltration both of the water and the roots. That will control erosion, that will prevent crusting. And this will give us the difference between simple A and simple B. If we look at the biological characteristic, one that is very important is the organic matter. What is a good amount of organic matter in the soil? 5%? You're pleased with 5%? The problem is that 5% tells you the amount of humus that you have in your soil. It doesn't tell you the quality of it. And a very high quality of organic matter, it might be better to have 3% of high quality than 5% of low quality. And the quality of the organic matter is going to tell you about your nitrogen efficiency. Again, by knowing your organic matter, this is the energy reservoir, carbon sequestration, water holding capacity. Now, this is about the same thing that we saw, the two soil sample. Now I have the profile of it, and this is what you can see by the profile. This is right under the growing area, and this is where the tractor goes by. This is where I want to have my healthy soil. This is where my crop is going to grow. How do I get there? But what is a healthy soil? Now that I've talked to you about the physical characteristic, the biological characteristic, I'm talking to you about chemistry now, can you tell me what a healthy soil is? I'll tell you what a healthy soil is if you're too shy to tell me. A healthy soil is a soil that will produce the most of the time. We had many fields, and we've been following them. This is a conventional plowing field. This is a first-year reduced tillage, This is a 5-year reduced tillage, and this is a 12-year no-till. Do you see a difference? But the big difference is in the yield that we received. I was not working on that experiment. I have a colleague that wanted to see the response to nitrogen, the response of wheat to nitrogen. And so he put no nitrogen at all and the optimum nitrogen level, and he measured the yield. And at the end of the year, it didn't make any sense because sometimes the response was very significant and sometimes it didn't make any difference. Not only didn't it make any difference, but the yield was completely different as well. So in that plowed field here, we had just about 2 tons per hectare of wheat without any nitrogen, and we had 2.9 with the nitrogen. As of in the no-till, where the profile was really good and the health was very much better, without any nitrogen, we got 4.2 tons, almost twice, more than twice the amount in the conventional. And with or without, it didn't make any difference. I'll talk to you about the nitrogen efficiency. This is where the nitrogen efficiency comes into mind. The efficiency here is a lot greater than there, and so it didn't bother if I put or not. But yet, the healthy soil did get a lot more out. And when I'm talking about healthy soil, I think this is what I want to look at. Does that make sense? Does that conclude the economics of it, or you want me to talk more about money? So the challenge is, how do we get from here to there? I call that the tillage move. How do I get from here to there? We have to look at every part of the system. What kind of rotation am I working with? How can I improve that rotation? Am I only doing soybean, corn? Can I add some wheat into it? Can I add some other things? Can I add cover crops? I can go from 3 crops, soybean, corn, and wheat, and by adding some cover crops into that, going up to 12 crops over 3 years instead of only 3. And I'm feeding the soil a lot. Now, what am I using as tillage? What kind of tillage am I doing? And I want to get into no-till. How do I do that? Do I make a move right away? Do I take steps? What steps do I take? I go to compacted soil. This is how it looks. And I want to get to healthy soil. It's going to take time. How much time? This is where we're having a lot of trouble, and this is where we're getting more and more into these physical and biological characteristics to know where we're at. Chemically, this is the same, but physically, this will tell us time. So if I put it there, then I'm going to ask myself, how long does it take? If I start from here, we're talking 8 years. There, 4 years. If I'm there, I'm talking next year. Where are you in your soil? Where can you get the data to know where you are in your soil? I think this is the step that we have to take now to get into no-till. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we would get into no-till by working with the machinery. Now we have to dig and go in the soil. We have to think machinery with respect to what we want to do in the soil. This is a story. I go in the soil first time in spring, then I go a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and every time I have different width of machinery that makes me go everywhere in the soil. Do you know that the first time you go in the soil, you compact up to 70% of the capacity of the soil? Did you know that? One of you did. So if you excuse me from now, I'm going to be talking to this guy. Not only does he answer the question, but he seems to be listening. So the first time you go in the field, you compact at about 70% of the potential. So every time you go across just a bit, just to make sure you don't hurt too much, you're hurting a lot more. Do you know how much weight per axle the soil is able to endure without having too much trouble? He doesn't want to answer. He's not looking anymore. 6 to 7 tons per axle. This is what we should be aiming at. How much does your manure tank weigh? Did you ever take time to weigh it? And then we have tractors. I had a producer who called me last spring and says, Odette, I'd like you to come home. I'd like to show you what I just bought. And I know when they're doing that. They don't want to show me their car. I got there, it was a 400 HP tractor. It was splitting in the middle. It had 3 wheels, 12 wheels altogether. It was to make sure that it was not compacting anymore. And I looked at him and said, I'm going to sit in the driver's seat. Put your feet under the wheel. Tell me if it compacts. And so at the end of the summer, I will go 45 degrees to make sure to break it all up. Sometimes I would even do the other thing. So this is what it looks like after the year. These brown spots are the only one that were not touched that year. Remember the 2 samples I showed you? 85%, 90% of the soil can be touched. If we go into control traffic, we can lower that down a little. And what would be the first thing that we can do to lower that down? What would be the first tillage or driving through the field that we can manage? Grain car. We have a 35-acre field here, and this is all the way that the grain car, it followed the harvester and so on. It went back and forth, and 12 miles of traffic. Do you recognize yourself or your neighbor? It would be so easy to have that grain car just over there and the harvester to go down and to empty at every end of the field. Don't you think so? No. Why? It's going to take you an hour more per field. You don't have time for that. Do you know that all that compaction here costs you 20 to 25% of the potential your soil has? Is 1 hour a year worth it, 25%? Think of that coffee shop talk. You just told me that you like to be able to say 200 bushel. You're living here 15 to 18 bushel just because of compaction.
Yeah, but if you said 225 or 250, the first liar didn't stand a chance.
So when we're talking, we have to look more into control traffic to see where we can avoid a little bit more these soil compaction. Over the past decades, the average weight of the tractors went from 10,000 pounds to 40,000 pounds. Do you have any problem with compaction? We have, in the early 80s in Quebec, there's a lot of drainage tile that would put in the soil. And for the past 2 years, a lot of producers are coming back in our offices, and they want to double their drain lines. So it was at 30 meters, or it was at 60 feet now. They want to put another line at 30 feet spacing. And every time they come to me, I don't know why they don't come much more anymore. But every time they come to me, I always say, do you think that 30 years ago the engineers were dumb enough to undersize your drainage system? The thing is that we're building these, we're designing the system based on the soil hydraulic conductivity. And this characteristic is a dynamic characteristic. It changes over time. And what make it change? The compaction. So they come to my office. 30 years ago, we paid for that tillage drainage system. And 30 years later, they come back and they want us to pay again. And I'm saying, what did you do to break it? And what are you going to promise me not to break it in the future? And so they don't come to me anymore. They go direct to my boss, which is a lot more conciliant and sign the check. We've been looking at different of these soil characteristics among producers. We had about 30 farms that we were sampling over the past year. And what we were looking at is that soil structural stability. And the green line here is no-till. The brown one is conventional. And what we see is that the stability, the structural stability, is a lot better in no-till than in conventional. But one thing we saw also, and this is not scientific, this is things that we've seen in the field, and with what we did is that we had the no-till fields, and then we went to the neighbor, which is in conventional. We didn't say to every neighbors that we went there, because we were not sure that the neighbors wanted us to look at his characteristics. But one thing that really surprised us is the density of soil. When we're getting into no-till, what we read in the literature is that the density of the no-till is always higher than in conventional. And this is pretty much what we see in the first years of no-till. Because in the conventional, you're plowing all the time, and you're putting air in the soil, so you're creating a false density of soil. And when you're doing no-till, you're not working it anymore, and then it's denser at the beginning. But over 15 years, what is happening is that the earthworms get into it, the roots, the bacteria, the fungi, and so it lightens the density. But what we were looking at mainly was the infiltration. And so at the first 6 inches, the infiltration was good, was very good in that case. But what we really like to see is that at a 12 to 14 inches deep, what the infiltration looked like, and in the no-till, it was always better than in the tillage system. Because at that 12 to 14 inches, this is the plow layer that's there, and so the water usually infiltrates well up to there, and then it goes sideways. And this is what is happening mainly with the drainage system. The water is at the top of it. Let's talk about earthworms. Would you like to talk about earthworms?